In this lecture, to discuss minority representation. The word minority may be used in more than one sense. In, it may stand for a political party like United Socialist Party or Jansang in India, and which is a minority party as compared to the ruling Congress party. As at present we found there are so many regional parties which would be considered as the parties representing the minority either in linguistic sense or in regional sense. Besides such political minorities, there may be racial, linguistic, and communal minorities. Thus, from the communal standpoint in India, the Hindus are in the majority and the Muslims or the Anglo Indians are in the minority so far as political minorities are concerned. Logically, they should be represented in the national legislature. Since democracy is based on the idea of popular sovereignty, the minorities must take part in the process of legislation as much as the majority. Moreover, as democracy actually implies a majority government, so the minorities should have their representatives in the legislature in order to protect their interest from majority assault. As it has already been pointed out, geographical demerits of representation and the merits of proportional representation. There is a special reason for the representation of minorities. For if more than two parties contest in a single member constituency, a party may win the seat even by pulling a minority of votes. In such a case, the minority of votes in that constituency goes unrepresented. So, the various methods which have been suggested for securing the representation of minorities show one of the principal methods, that proportional representation, which has already we have discussed in our previous two lectures in one and the other methods of minority representation, that we could discuss under three different systems of voting. And the first system is that cumulative vote system. This system involves multi-member constituency. The voter has the right to cast as many votes as there are seats in a constituency, but his votes may be spread over several candidates or concentrated on one candidate only, as the voters belonging to a minority party may elect their representative by concentrating all their votes on him. And this is the very voting system that we found under cumulative vote system. That is a part of minority representation. And the second system of voting is the limited vote system. The constituencies under this system also are multi-member ones. the voters are allowed to cast a certain number of votes which is less than the number of seats to be filled. Thus, if there are 6 seats in a constituency, his voter is given the right to cast only 5 votes or less. By limiting the number of votes of each voter, this system acts as a check on the monopolization of representation in a constituency by a single political party and helps the minority to get at least one seat. And now we'll discuss the third one, and that is communal representation, as it is a part of minority representation. So, special arrangements are sometimes made for the representation of minority communities. So, there are maybe separate electorates for separate communities. Under British rule in India, such a system was introduced as under the Government of India Act 1909 and Government of India Act 1919. Also separate electorates, separate communities such as for the Muslims was introduced by the Britishers under the Government of India Act 1935. Thus, voters of each community voted for candidates of their own community. The Hindus voted for Hindu candidates and Muslim for Muslim candidates. A second method of communal representation is the reservation of seats in a joint electorate. Under this system, the voters may cast their votes for the candidates of communities other than their own. But in deciding the result, a member of the community having reservation of seats who gets the highest number of votes among the candidates of that community will be declared elected. Although candidates of other communities might have pooled a larger number of votes. So, as under Articles 330 and 332 of Indian Constitution, there are provisions for the reservation of seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the House of People and also in the legislative assemblies of the states. In spite of the seemingly valid arguments in favor of minority representation, it is significant to note that such representation spells a number of practical difficulties, as it has already been pointed out with reference to proportional representation. Any system of minority representation is sure to multiply the number of parties in the legislature. No single party in such a case would have an adequate majority in the legislature to form a ministry. Its inevitable result is the formation of a coalition ministry based on the delicate principle of temporary compromise. The great defect of such a ministry in its feebleness and short-lived existence. A strong allegation is made against minority representation by maintaining that it seeks to pay premium on anti democratic forces in a country that it seeks to pay, thus to imperil the operation of democracy. A system of minority representation deliberately divides the people into hostile camps. It encourages the minorities to indulge in minority thinking, a minority that views the world in the mirror of its own group is apt to get a distorted idea of the reality. Consequently, democracy, which postulates the existence of a common will, suffers most under a system of minority representation. So, really speaking, mere multiplication of the methods of minority representation offers no solution to the fundamental issues involved. The crux of the problem is, however, can every group of people be given an opportunity to influence the process of legislation? The remedy lies in creating avenues for the expression of minority opinions. So, these are the various different methods adopted in minority representations, such as the cumulative vote system, the limited vote system, and the finally communal representation. And as regarding these very systems, we found some advocates of minority representation in legislature by applying these vote systems to represent the interest of the minorities. And as also we found in Indian Constitution, in particular Article 330 and Article 332, which provides for reservation of seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the House of People or the Lok Sabha, and also in the state legislative assemblies. And also we have discussed in length about the very defects of demoralizing the democratic beliefs among the people and destabilizing a government, and how it led to coalition politics and formation of coalition government, and the very weakness of democracy, and that the minority representation as it was introduced by the Britishers under the Government of India Acts of 1909 and 1919, and finally in the Government of India Act 1935 by giving separate representation to the Indian Muslims, and how this took in turn to communal representation. And we have discussed those defects and perils and dangers to democracy due to minority representation. So, in this particular lecture, as we have discussed about minority representation, so it would create the very democracy into a weak and unstable, and it would lead to the coalition politics and coalition government, and also it would tend to increase different number of political parties, which would ultimately lead to coalition government. So we have completed our lecture on minority representation.